Hey there folks, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it looks like we got a bit of a cool down week, calm before the storm, except not much calm, and it's Billboard Breakdown.
I don't remember.
I'm a little bit perplexed on how I want to cover this week. On the one hand, I think Luke Combs is likely getting an album bomb next week, so most of what happened here is not remotely guaranteed to stick around. On the other hand, this week is both busier than you might expect and kind of all over the place, especially when it comes to some of the new entries. It'll be fascinating to see what might actually gain traction in the long run, if anything here at all. Unfortunately, none of this is really carried over to the top 10, where for yet another week, Flowers by Miley Cyrus holds the number 1. But honestly, I don't put a lot of stock in it going forward. It's slipping on streaming, the sales are down, radio may have peaked. That makes it vulnerable to Last Night by Morgan Wallen, currently at number 2, which remains really strong on streaming, and while it lags on sales, it's going to be a radio rush to see if it actually can beat the margins there. It's possible. Now this once again places Kill Bill by SZA in an awkward position at number 3. It had a really good radio week. Positionally, it's right behind Last Night on streaming, but this is where that margin is there and the little sales to speak of really kill its momentum. Then there's Creepin' by Metro Boomin, 21 Savage in the weekend up to number 4. It actually surged on streaming to rise on position, but radio's wavering. I don't see it breaking the margin there. Whereas Die For You by The Weeknd and Ariana Grande went down to number 5 because despite stable streaming, that radio margin is not holding up. Then we got Boys a Liar Part 2 by Pink Pantheress and Ice Spice at number 6. Streaming is stable, the radio is moving fast to capitalize, but again, feels like a margins game where it's not there. But it did hold up over Antihero by Taylor Swift at number 7 as the radio slowly rotates it out. Then we got Calm Down by Rima and Selena Gomez holding at number 8. The radio really likes this one even if the streaming just isn't really there, and that takes us to the 2 breakthroughs into the top 10 that I was frankly expecting last week. First is Players by Coi Leray at number 9. The radio adores it, even if the sales and streaming are kind of iffy. That's telling. And then there's Rockin' a Hard Place by Bailey Zimmerman at number 10, which actually has better streaming than you might expect and some modicum of radio stability, which is what actually got it into the top 10 as other tracks collapse around him. He's still a surprise I did not see coming. I thought when Morgan Wallen came back, he'd be out, but apparently not. But while we're in that territory, our losers and dropouts, where outside of a bunch of forgettable Morgan Wallen deep cuts, we got 2 big songs in the latter category. Lift Me Up by Rihanna and Made You Look by Meghan Trainor. Now both these are going to make the year-end list for 2023. We're just going to have to deal with that. But for our losers, well, Nicki Minaj once again has no traction with Red Ruby Da Sleaze sliding down to 47, and Miley Cyrus saw losses off the debut for River at 59, and Jaded at 97, but it's still the Morgan Wallen story, I gotta say it. So with that in mind, I wrote the book at 46, Man Made a Bar with Eric Church at 51, 98 Braves at 61, Sunrise at 62, Whiskey Friends at 80, Devil Don't Know at 86, Neon Star, Country Boy Lullaby at 90, Born with a Beer in My Hand at 94, and Me and All Your Reasons at 99. But of course, things will have to eventually replace Morgan Wallen, and in our returns and gains, kind of all over the place. And a Luke Combs album bomb is going to destabilize all this next week. Looking at our returns, I mean, I'm happy that Human by Cody Johnson's back at 91, but I don't really expect it to last. Along with Gold by Dierks Bentley at 93, and Here With Me by David at 98. Now, I think the gains are a bit tougher to gauge. On the one hand, I did predict that Favorite Song by Tootsie would continue to rise up to 21. Same with What He Didn't Do by Carly Pearce at 37. And Love You Anyway by Luke Combs is just going to surge next week, rising up to 49. And I'm not going to complain, it's a great song. But then there are the smaller gains I expect to be wiped away completely, like Dancing in the Country by Tyler Hubbard up to 83, and Heaven by Niall Horan at 82 off the returns. But the big story is probably the success of Peso Pluma across 3 gains this week, likely buoyed alongside his new arrivals. Ergo, his debut from last week, Por Las Noches, rose up to 72, the return for PRC with Nathaniel Cano went to 73, and AMG with Nathaniel Cano and Gabito Ballesteros went to 70. I'm a little bit baffled as to why he is getting such a major push. I personally don't see the star power as of yet. But again, the real key is if he lasts for another week, we will have to see. But while we're in this territory, we got a very healthy list of new arrivals, most of which won't last, so let's start off with number 100, Cupid by 50/50. think I need to have a better idea of which K-pop groups have some crossover traction, because I feel like I'm encountering more of them seemingly from out of nowhere. Now, 50/50 is newer, I'll give myself some credit. They only formed last year, they dropped their debut, and this appears to be their first single to get serious traction simultaneously in South Korea and the US. And I kinda get it. The new disco production is well balanced with a solid punchy groove and tangible gloss, and the girls have more tangible personality between them. They're one of the K-pop girl groups where the differing vocal textures really stick out for a song that's all about the mingled frustration of falling in love again when they probably really shouldn't. Now, I definitely think there's a lot of Doja Cat in the formula for this in particular, but especially in the singing, I think 50/50 has the edge with a little bit more polish and, dare I even say, maturity. So yeah, I actually really dig this song. I don't think it's gonna last, but good stuff. Number 96, Nasty by Russ.
Yeah, I want you to get nasty, nasty. Yeah, I want you to get nasty. Do that thing you know I like. No one watching, it's just me and you, alright? Yeah.
How many times are we going to keep attempting the Russ experiment? He's one of the most tangible reminders that consistent critical backlash doesn't really impact you if you got a diehard fan base who won't listen to anyone else. And now with this, oh good lord, who is asking for another sex jam from this guy? Especially with the bass that swamps out the entire mix, including his vocals, against a spare clap and faint whisper of melody? And yes, I know it was built for TikTok as it doesn't even run 2 minutes, and to Russ's credit, the only really awful line is "top me off in the morning." Now that's what I call a head start. But what I think annoys me the most here is how goddamn basic it sounds, with Russ bringing nothing close to intensity. He can't sell sensuality with any kind of atmosphere. This is just empty sleaze at the most basic possible level. I mean, it's perhaps not his worst ever song, but it's certainly disposable and ain't good. But speaking of basic, number 95, Death by Melanie Martinez. The last time Melanie Martinez charted on the Hot 100 was back when she was on The Voice. I would have preferred that was the last time anyone talked about her. I'm not even talking about the allegations. This situation's made abundantly easier for me by the music being mediocre at best and rancid, badly produced, self-impressed garbage at worst. But she's also cultivated a fan base who have refused to listen to Backlash, or seemingly any of the other artists Melanie Martinez has shamelessly ripped off, and that's led to this single that's actually charting. And you know, I'll say this. It's not as faintly gross as a lot of Melanie Martinez's other material, but that might make it worse in hindsight, given that it exposes how basic her theatricality actually is. A big part of this is how overprocessed her vocals sound against the acoustics and strings, and wow, I forgot how clunky of a songwriter she was and just how many rhymes she drops. But then she brings in this buzzy electric guitar knock on the hook with the bricked out percussion, and it sounds like something Halsey would have abandoned in 2019, likely for good reason. Then there's the writing. Flatly obvious, lacking greater poetic detail as per usual. It's obviously implying some sort of a revival for Melanie Martinez. You shouldn't be scared of her or death anyway, as she's drawn back for some sort of deeply held love, and hell, we all die anyways. But that kind of compromises the stakes. People are afraid of death because they don't know what happens or they did some awful shit in life. And who says that it's more than just you who comes back here? Or I don't know, the entire song is another extended career metaphor, and I'm giving this way more thought than it deserves. Whatever, it's not as bad as Melanie Martinez can get. I can think of songs on Cry Baby and K-12 that are actively worse, but that's not an endorsement of this basic junk. Next, number 92, Moonlight by Uchis. Okay, one song by Uchis didn't really work for me. Actually, I had a really strong negative reaction. I was kind of surprised, but I was willing to give her a second chance. And to her credit, this is more of a blissed out love song with another blubbery funk bass line and spare melody opposite some sharper percussion and chimes. And a simpler focus lets Uchis rely on her richer vocal tone for a desire just to get high and fuck. Now her voice here reminds me a little of Kimbra when she did R&B, and then I'm reminded of how much of a disappointment Kimbra's album was this year. But okay, I think this song might be a little bit overmixed in some of the glassy humidity. It could afford to be a bit more organic, but that is me nitpicking. This is a much better song, it sets a good vibe, I'll give it a pass. Number 88, I See You by Coco Jones.
When I leave you, I see you.
I feel like I should have known about Coco Jones before now. She's been putting out EPs for over a decade, although it looks like it's taken more of a backseat to her film and TV career, predominantly driven off of Disney. But now apparently she signed a Def Jam, with this being her first single that's actually taken off, and I'm kind of conflicted on it. On the one hand, I actually really like the instrumentation here, with the spare percussion, the playful pianos, the gentle guitars, the ethereal backing vocals. It's absolutely going for a throwback R&B vibe, but that can really work. But man, the vocal production really lets her down here. In between the weird flatness to the backing vocals that doesn't really blend, to how compressed and processed her lead vocal line is. And I don't know why that's the case. She's been working in the industry for years now. If she's got tangible talent, they shouldn't have had to do this. Well, outside of that, lyrics are a bit thin in this love that she's constantly being drawn back to, but not a deal breaker. Honestly, I just want whoever engineered this to fail, because it's a decent song, but it should be excellent. Number 87, Coco Chanel by Eladio, Carrion, and Bad Bunny. Okay, Eladio Carrion feels like also the sort of artist I should have known about before now. He's in the reggaeton scene, he's been releasing albums and charting pretty consistently, and on this newest project he got co-signs from both Lil Wayne and Bad Bunny, this being his big breakthrough single. And yet, I'm not sure about this one. The squonking synth that gets washed out as the percussion switches from a padded groove to some clicking Latin trap, and while Eladio Carrion has a bit more personality and actually balances out with Bad Bunny pretty well, when you translate the song and realize that it's just glorified brand name porn where the disinterest from both these guys is palpable, you realize that this is really only getting on the charts thanks to the groove, and while it's nice, it's not exceptional. I just don't see much of a reason why I would go back to this song. I mean, it's not bad, not exactly good either. Number 84, El Gordo Trae El Mando by Chino, Pacas.
Por la zapata el Gordo trae el mando, tirando línea con Manel Cañá, a la respalde Soren conectado.
So there's a significant chunk of regional Mexican music that actually charted this week. From what I can tell, this one guy's got about 3 songs in total. This is the only one with him solo that dropped in January earlier this year. It doesn't even eclipse 2 minutes. And I'm starting to run out of things to say about these tracks. The nasal vocals, the clicking acoustics, the farty horns because it's still produced to sound like a demo, and in this case, translating the lyrics about flexing and gunplay, it really clashes with the production. Hell, there's not even a hook here. It feels like a goddamn fragment. Not a bad fragment per se, I've heard worse, but the fact that these songs run together so quickly for me is not a good sign for this long term. That's all I'm saying. Number 77, La Bebe by Young Lvcas and Peso Pluma. I get the feeling that Peso Pluma is the guy from the regional Mexican scene getting something of an industry push, which is why he's now on a remix of a song that dropped in late 2021. The original artist is Young Lvcas. From what I can tell, he's got a couple mixtapes that didn't really seem to go anywhere. I can't be the only one who thinks this feels kind of exploitative in the same way that record labels grab other underground viral acts for the one song and then leave them behind. And then with this, I mean, come on, they dropped Peso Pluma on this stock reggaeton groove with blocky percussion, a muted melody, no momentum, and everyone sounding like they're on a steady IV drip of lean. Now, I did discover that Peso Pluma wanted to make reggaeton at some point, but he blew up with the regional Mexican sound. For going for an already dated reggaeton groove feels like really bad label advice, especially for the sort of stock horniness and flexing I feel like I've seen done far better so many times. Just gonna say it now, this feels like a big misstep. We'll have to see if it lasts or just falls out. Number 67, Eat Your Young by Hozier. So I was actually going to review the Hozier EP. I was really excited, but it's only 3 songs, and the one I actually liked, it's not going to chart, but this one did. And as someone who likes Hozier a lot, Oh man, I think it's a miss. I'm sorry. Yeah, the opulent strings and the bombast against the echoing guitars, they sound epic. I really like the fluttery piano against the cello on the outro. This is the sort of gothic swell that Hozier can normally command. So why in the nine hells is he spending his entire hook in his falsetto register? He's got one of the richest timbres in his mid-range working today. Why abandon it for this crooning that doesn't remotely flatter his strengths and feels anonymous? What sucks is that the lyrics are actually good too. The sort of graphic, late capitalist nightmare written from the villain's perspective that goes into cannibalism, building off of Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, that is potent as all hell, but it feels neutered of that darker power because of the vocals, and that's so damn frustrating as someone who really wants to see Hozier get more traction. Because I don't think this is bad, but given that it's so obvious where it could kick ass and it doesn't, man, that's frustrating. Number 45, 5-Leaf Clover by Luke Combs.
But the one thing I can't get over is how a guy like me, who'd have been fine with 3, wind up with a 5-leaf clover.
See, this is why I've come to like Luke Combs and his consistency, at least, especially in the wake of the newest album cycle, where he put out his best work to date and is really picking good singles, with 5-Leaf Clover being another big winner for me. Of course, he leans on the fiddle and the warm acoustics for that slight Irish touch in the melody, kind of inspired timing for the St. Patrick's Day release. And you know, it's a song all about being thankful for all the fortune he's found in his life, where he'd just been content with getting by, and now he's received way more, and he's kind of welcomely surprised by it. Now, it does have the feel of being a bit too comfortable. I feel like the song is missing maybe a short bridge to really put it into a higher tier, a shade bit more complexity. But again, absolutely me nitpicking there. It's a great song, nice single choice. Looking forward to that nice spike it's gonna get next week. Check this out. Number 30, Set Me Free Part 2 by Jimin.
It set me free. It set me free. It set me free.
Alright, we're now adding to the canon of BTS solo releases with Jimin's turn, and make no mistake, the stans have really gotten behind him, with his single for next week targeting a really big debut. But with this, I'm not sure I'm on board with this one, with the huge operatic horns and bombastic backing vocals and the percussion that don't really match Jimin's overproduced squawking and rapping. He's a considerably better singer, and he does a lot less of it than he should. But even when he does sing, his timbre does not have the power to really command this mix as much as he darts into his falsetto on the hook. And the problem is that there's just not really much to support all the bombast. This has the feel of a I'm Back Bitch single, where there's so much about seeking freedom and everyone getting the fuck out of his way that it feels really overblown if you've not bought into his particular part of the BTS story. In other words, when I come down on NF when he says a lot more and it feels just as hollow with all the bombast, I'm sorry, does not really work for me. Number 26, Ella Bella Solo by Eslabon Armado and Peso Pluma.
Bailando sola me gusta pa' mí.
Okay, this looks like something that resembles a better push for Peso Pluma. Eslabon Armado already got a charting single back in 2021. Both acts have a more traditional Mexican sound. This makes all the sense in the world for some synergy, a proper push. Of course, the difference would be to make something that feels like a fully composed and produced song, instead with all the staccato horns sounding as flat and squonking at the front of the mix as ever, with all the fast-picked brittle acoustics competing for oxygen alongside the spare groove and bare-bone vocal harmonies. There's not even a hook on this song, come on. I mean, I guess for these guys playing wingmen for each other, there's not much that's really needed here. And yes, I'm sure there is a communal cultural context that's not clicking for me, but it's gonna work for the target audience. But I also know that if these songs had more structure and competent production and weren't obviously getting rushed for a quick buck by their labels to go viral, I would not hear all the same excuses. I mean, it's not even that bad, it's just nowhere near as good as it could be. Just keep that in mind. And finally, number 12, All of the Girls You Loved Before by Taylor Swift.
For all of the girls you loved before, but I love you more.
So I'm in Canada. The Era's tour dates have not yet been announced up here yet, but I don't expect I'm gonna go or even try because I'm not interested in taking out a second mortgage on my condo. But hey, Taylor Swift is something for all the folks who are not going or who were thoroughly fucked by Ticketmaster. In this case, a song that was intended for Lover back in 2019, but missed the cut. And as someone who actually really likes that album more than most, I think I go back to it more often as a whole than Folklore, I was curious about this. And, okay, I kind of get why it was cut. Lover is probably overlong as it is, and this doesn't really wow me. The spare reverb synths with the faint guitars, the let-in percussion, where the song almost seems to be trying towards some smoky R&B courtesy of Louis Bell's production, and, well, the sentiment of all their past partners being who shaped them to now work together, that's decent coming from Taylor Swift. I don't love how she ended the hook with, "But I love you more." It's definitely one of those catty moments that doesn't feel as sharp as it would become a couple of years later, and I would tolerate it more. I mean, I get why this is pushed, it's generally fine. But after Midnights, I've discovered I think I've got higher standards for Taylor Swift now. The throwaways just don't cut it for me in the same way. Just saying. But that was a long week. The worst fallout real easy. Death by Melanie Martinez and Nasty by Russ is the dishonorable mention. Best of the week though? Okay, 5 Leaf Clover by Luke Combs is just running away with that. But honorable mention is kind of trickier because I really wanted it to be Hozier, but I'm going to go with Cupid by 50/50. That was a really nice pleasant surprise, even if it won't last. But speaking of Luke Combs, he's likely got a big album bomb coming for next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.